Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Raw Knuckles podcast. We'd really appreciate it if you'd like, subscribe, and share with a friend. I often ask people around the league I knew, I said, what's he like? What's he like? And I've asked guys who played for you over the years. And certainly you come as advertised. Mike Keenan's a prick.
Yep.
Mike's a prick.
Yep.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down, and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious, and I was malicious, and I don't care.
He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine.
Mike, welcome to the Raw Knuckles podcast. Awesome to have you as a guest, especially because we got a guy who used to play for you. Like, I wanted to play for you, and that never happened. And I'm going to ask you about that, actually, in a little bit. But welcome to the show. And listen, one thing I always wanted to know, Iron Mike, the nickname Iron Mike, where does it come from? And how'd you get tagged with that?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. First of all, great to be with you. And the genesis of that came from Chicago when Mike Ditka was coaching the Bears. I was in Chicago, and they obviously assumed I was quite strict as well. And the media picked up on it and said, we have two Iron Mikes in town, Ditka and Keenan. So that's how that surfaced, and then it continued from there. But it was because of Mike Ditka's stern approach to football and Mike Keenan's stern approach to hockey, or discipline, whatever you want to call it. That's how the name came about, and it stuck after I left Chicago for the rest of my career.
Did you ever get to meet him, Mike Ditka?
I did, yes. I was really in a good situation as the coach of the Blackhawks. Our team evolved, and we had a hard-nosed team, as well, as you know, with Chelios and Balfour and the gang and all the fighters we had, Stu Grimson and so on. And the Bears were doing well. The Bulls with Michael Jordan were winning championships. We were going to the finals. The Bears doing well. So the city was electric. It was on fire with all the championship runs, and Phil Jackson was the coach of the. He and I actually did some commercials together at Ditka. So yeah, the answer is I met some great legend coaches in that city.
Well, obviously, Iron Mike, the coach, is one thing, but Knuckles wants to know Iron Mike, the player. Now, we go back to St. Lawrence University, played there 3 years, University of Toronto, and you left St. Lawrence, ECAC. You put up some decent numbers there, no question about it, right? Point a game anyway in your final season, and then you ripped it up at University of Toronto. Now, after leaving college, the Roanoke Valley Rebels, was that an East Coast Hockey League team or
At the time,
Eastern League? Was it the old Eastern League?
no. At the time, I was drafted by the Vancouver Blazers in the WHA, and that was their farm team. And all the farm teams, primarily for the WHA teams, were in that part of the country: Macon, Georgia, Greensboro, Charlotte, Roanoke, you mentioned. And so it was a young, youthful league, but it was aggressive, really aggressive in terms of fisticuffs and brawls and what have you. So there was that element to the league. Yet the team I played on, there were a lot of young guys that went on to play in the NHL eventually, and some started in the WHA and flipped over. So yeah, it was pretty competitive, but it was an interesting experience for sure.
What kind of player were you? I see you had 61 points this one season. I thought that was like a misprint. But what were you?
I was over a point a game, and I played forward in defense as a player, whatever the need was at the time in terms of the lineup and injuries. But yeah, we won a championship that particular year, and if you look at the PIMS, you'd be impressed. I think it was close to 100 PIMS.
I saw them.
Yeah.
So 94 PIMS. and you even managed 14 in the playoffs. That's you have one penalty minute a game because you play 14 games in the playoffs. Now, the Whitby McDonald's and then the Whitby Warriors, was that a senior league?
Senior A for the Allen Cup. So when I
Okay.
came back from Roanoke, and I was recruited to be the playing coach. I was a high school teacher at this time, and they asked me to come and you'd be interested because I did have some famous NHL players on the team. Eddie Shack played, Carl Brewer
Clear the
played,
track.
a number of fellows that played in the NHL or the WHA came and played senior A hockey at that time for the Allen Cup, and we can go back to even Harry Sinden in 1958. The Whitby Dunlops beat the Soviet Union in Oslo for the gold medal, and I was the stick boy for that team out of Whitby at the time. So I was familiar with senior A hockey. So I played that for a while, and then I got a call to try out for the Olympic team for Canada. The famous year when USA won the 1980 Olympics against the Soviet
Yeah.
Union. But I also got a call from the Peterborough Petes. So I was coaching senior hockey. Then I broke my shoulder. So then I started coaching junior hockey in Oshawa and teaching high school and coaching high school, various sports. And then from there, I got a call as I was in the Olympic program for Peterborough Pete. So I said, well, the Olympics are going to be over in February, and maybe I have an opportunity to do something here. So I took a leave of absence from teaching and went to Peterborough. We went to the Memorial Cup, and then Scotty Bowman recruited me to go to Rochester, where I coached for 3 years, won the Calder Cup, and then the University of Toronto, where I graduated from grad school, recruited me to come back. We won a national title that particular year when I came back to the University of Toronto, and then the Philadelphia Flyers, Bobby Clark and the Snyder family offered me a contract, and the rest is history. I went to the NHL. At that point, I was 1984.
So when we talk about the rest is history, no question about it. And when you look back, and your degree is in from Toronto, University of Toronto. Is that in psychology?
No, that was in education. Well, it had there was psychology courses in it, but it was a all-inclusive degree in education that prepared you to teach, as well as my background at St. Lawrence was bachelor's science, and then in
Yeah.
phys ed, and then I went on to get the educational degree from University of Toronto.
How much did that degree help you? I guess I guess the communication aspect when it came to coaching. You get into coaching now, and certainly a different era than today. How much did that kind of impact you or help you?
Well, it did help me in the fact that you had to have a good skill set on your feet, be able to address students, and you'll be surprised. Like I coached high school, but I coached the first team I ever coached, and I played it was box lacrosse, and we won the championship in Metro Toronto, and I just loved it. I was young kid. I was 24 years old or 25, and I was making them exercise and running with them 5 miles a day and all that stuff. So that influenced, but the educational background, and even throughout my college days, and then thereafter, I was teaching in hockey schools at St. Lawrence, and then hockey schools at University of Toronto, and you'll be surprised. One of my coaching debuts was a female swimming team, and we did really well with that. So I was a basketball coach, the hockey coach, the swim coach, and lacrosse. So yeah, we won the
You didn't have any males on that team at the time,
no,
did you? Okay, good.
but it was I had a variety of backgrounds in terms of coaching skills, and the educational aspect of it certainly helped. in your ability to communicate and address groups of people and of course hockey teams. So that did help for sure.
Did you ever think then, like, you're gonna go have the, you know what I mean? Like, were you coaching the swim team and all these teams, and then, but like in the back of your head, like, I'm gonna coach a Stanley Cup champion team one
No,
day, or like,
not
what was,
not
you
no
know?
no not at all. I didn't really. I had a lot of success in junior hockey in Oshawa as well. We won two titles for Metro Toronto, which was a big league at the time. And then when I went to Peterborough, when I made that decision to go be a general manager and coach for the Peterborough Petes and take the leave of absence from school, that was probably the beginning of what I thought, well, maybe I'd like to pursue a coaching career and let's see what happens. So it lucked out. We go to the Memorial Cup, and then Bowman comes and we win the cup in Rochester and win the cup in University of Toronto. That all happened within 5 years. And then I was introduced to or got an opportunity to go to the NHL. So that's really the genesis of it and how it worked out for me. I didn't go to when I was teaching high school, I didn't think about coaching the NHL. I mean, a lot of the coaches at the time they were all former players, so it wasn't that optimistic that I could end up being a coach in the NHL.
Funny, listen, we can cut to the chase, I guess, and just I and Mike. I often ask people around the league I knew, what's he like? What's he like? And I've asked guys who played for you over the years, and certainly you come as advertised. Mike Keenan's a prick.
Yep.
Mike's a prick.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I've met you twice. I met you at the ball tournament one time,
Yes.
that street hockey
In Toronto, yeah.
charity, and then one time in Chicago we had a
Yep.
talk. And I find you to be a nice guy. I didn't play for you, but I certainly would have loved to kind of find out on my own, because we look at a guy like Brian Noonan, who played for
Yes.
you, who seemed to follow you everywhere. You seem to have something going on with Noonan as far as you liking him as a player, or maybe he could be one of them guys that you could kick in the ass and he just keep going where other guys may crumble. Is there any truth to that?
I think the essence of it was that, it's very stern, and some people thought I was a prick, but I was a good prick, and they thrived on success. You guys would know as players that winning is very important, and it solves a lot of problems. But I had some great players too that enjoyed playing for me, and particularly the superstars like Gretzky or Mess or Chelly, Pronger. I can go on and on, the Hall of Famers. They kind of liked it that I would emphasize and demand a lot out of lesser players, because they knew that the team would get stronger. And Nunes is a good example. I had a good relationship with Toe, Kraftcheck. I'm just trying to think. Zezel, God bless his soul.
Yeah.
I mean, I had so many of them. I continue to bring them with me. And, even Chelly, as hard as I was, he says, you were my favorite coach. And you played in Montreal with Chelly. So he was a determined. He was such a competitor. He just loved that we were winning. So, the guys that the guys that found it more difficult were the more borderline players than the better players. So
you were consistent too, because I grew up. I was probably like 10 years old when you became Iron Mike, and then like 25 years later, me and you had a fuck you match on the bench. So I knew you're pretty consistent, right? No, but it's funny because what you said with Chelly saying you were the best coach, and like for me, I wasn't long with you, but I just felt that even my parents were saying it's like the hardest I played, and I did feel that I was always you didn't know what to expect, and you kind of, at least me, you always had me ready, so I kind of understood it, but you were a prick. but a good prick.
Yeah, that's what I said. Matteau told a young guy, I don't know who it was now. He came to Chicago. I traded for a lot of guys, and so he said to Matteau, or the fellow said to Matteau, "Well, what about this Keenan guy?" He says, "Well, I'll give you two things: don't have a bad warm up, and don't have a bad first shift." So
So
we demanded a lot, and predictably unpredictable, keeping them on edge and ready, uh, right from the drop of the puck until it was over. Like, you got to stay, and it's, we're human beings, and we can drift and lose concentration, and it's McCrimmon, God bless his soul too. He was
yeah.
great in the locker room with Mark Howell and the guys that say, "Oh God, he's tough." And Brad said, "He is, but shut the f up, because we're winning, and he knows what he's doing." So
Yeah.
that was
Well,
important. That I had, fundamentally, you don't win all the time like that without getting the support of the the main groups, or the core groups, or the leaders on the team, and I understood how that worked. And the best example, I guess, or the most public example, would be Mark Messier in New York. But
yeah.
I was hired twice because superstars went to the owners and said, "I want this guy." And once was in Vancouver. Mess went to John McCaw, the owner, and said, "I want this guy." And I went in negotiations with John. He said, "This is the worst negotiations I've ever been in. How long do you want, and how much do you want?" And the other one was Pavel Bure with Alan Cohen in Florida. And he just went to the owner and said, "I want my coach here. It's Mike Keenan." So,
Well, that's awesome. It does say a lot about you when you have guys like that wanting you there, and they carry the kind of sway that they did. Like, how would you describe your coaching style, and what is it that people get wrong about you?
well, the coaching style was firm but fair, and it evolved. I mean, you're talking about guys, and the latter portion of my career, I was sort of ousted out of the NHL. He's too tough, or whatever the case might be. And the last example was in Calgary, but I left Calgary. We had gone to the Game 7 twice. And when I left Calgary, they didn't make the playoffs for 6 years. So I was ousted out of the league. I went to Russia. And the point I'm getting at is that my style evolved. I coached various levels of sports and hockey for 5 decades. So and won in every decade. So you don't continue to win unless you make adaptations to your own demeanor, style, whatever the case might be, your skill set. Going to Russia, I had to learn to speak Russian to coach, and that was a unbelievable experience. And my first year we win the cup. That no North American had ever won a cup before. So a variety of different roles for the coach. And I took Mike Polino with me, who coached with me in New York and played for me in junior hockey in U of T. But when I got there, I said, biggest responsibility we have is to understand, not to be understood. And I felt embarrassed about some of my time in the NHL when I had foreign players who couldn't speak English, and I never threw them a lifeline. I never taught them how to get to the
Yeah.
bank, or how to go find an apartment, or whatever. And I said, I really missed the boat there, but most of us probably did. But the misunderstanding would be that, and you'd find this hard to believe, uh, uh, I'm pretty uh, tied into my family, and away from the time that we spend during a game is completely different than the time that we spend in preparing, or you have with your family, or whatever the case might be. So as a youngster, I was a very sensitive kid, and it served me well because I could read people and had that.
Where does that come from? Where
Side
does
of
that
me?
sensitivity come from?
Just the way I was raised. My parents, I was the oldest child of four, Irish family, and I was just taught well in particular by, I could say both my parents, but my mother was a big influence, and because she was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a factory worker. He was electrician in General Motors. So that's really, and then um, I was, in grade school and in high school, um, I was sensitive to people's needs and thoughts. And, I was a good athlete. I won the athlete of the year in the high school in ninth grade, which is unheard of. So I had learned leadership roles because of that early in high school. That I was playing junior hockey when I was 15, but I also played in the high school sports, ran track and field, and played on the basketball team and played on the school hockey team, and all kinds of different backgrounds in athletics. So I think that's a long-winded answer, but maybe
I
maybe
hear
to
you.
the point.
I hear you for sure. Now, coaching in Russia, you said obviously you got to maybe let those, you got to hear those players. And, you made a great point about players who come over here. And I went to Russia to play in alumni hockey, old timer stuff. And I found it a bit of a
Yeah.
culture shock, right? And I never thought
Yes.
of players coming over here. I remember we had Mats Nazzle come over from Sweden, and Mats even, know the language right away a little bit. And I never really much
Yeah.
thought of that. I did. I talked to guys. They roomed me with Vladimir Vrzyska. He couldn't speak a lick of English when I was in Boston. So I can only imagine what
Yeah.
that was like going the other way. I never thought about that, like you pointing out. And Tim, having gone over there and played, obviously for you, we had talked about it. And I said, that must have been kind of like a good dynamic, because here's Mike over there in Russia with all these Russians coaching them. And then you got a North American kid come over. He must have embraced you. Did he, Tim? Did he embrace
Well,
you?
Yeah, he was very.
I'm curious.
Yeah,
but like, here's a North American kid.
We had a couple other. I just thought it was like amazing to see. I mean, like when you got the job in Russia, you went to Russia, where you just like this, like half the guys didn't understand what you're saying, right? Like,
right.
I mean, you'd be yelling at a guy like in his face, a Russian guy, like you fucking pussy, whatever you want to call it, and then he's looking at me like, Tim, what do you say? And I'm like, you're playing well, keep it going.
Yeah.
But like, so were you just like, I could be Iron Mike again, and just like, what was, you know what I mean? Like that had to be
I
tough,
think I was quite a bit different in terms of I knew that, but Ilya Vorovia was my assistant coach and Russian player who played for Dave King, and then worked with Paul Maurice, and then worked with me, and he was interpreting in the room quite often, but then he stopped, and I turned to him and said, "Why aren't you interpreting anymore?" He says, "You know enough that they understand you and they know what you want." So there was 5 or 6 guys, North American guys or guys from Czech Republic or Finland or whatever, they could speak English, but 95% of them couldn't.
No.
So you had learned some phrases that would "Payekala," that means let's go, or bistro, quickly, or things like that to initiate their thinking. But they were really respectful and responsive. They liked the firmness to a certain extent, and that maybe goes back to their culture. So anyway, we had a pretty successful run there.
Yeah, you did. You had and going back to Nux, your question, yeah, you were very welcoming, but you were Iron Mike like right away too. I think you had me on like 5 different lines before I took my first shift. So it's
like don't have a bad warm up.
Yeah. So that'll answer your question, Ducks. He was welcoming, but he was Iron Mike too.
Well,
so
it must have been quite an experience, but I got to think of an experience that we were both part of, Mike and I, and that would be back in 1987, the brawl to end all brawls. And God, when I think back, you bastard, dressing all of those guys for warm-ups, and that changed hockey too, right? That night, we were certainly
It
outgunned in
did.
our own building as far as numbers, but when you look back at that, and I look at that and I say, Jesus, I remember I was with Brownie. What a sweetheart of a guy, Dave Brown. And
Yeah,
for
oh, he
those of you
is.
who don't know,
Yeah.
the brawl that ended all brawls, the Flyers, Canadians before the game, and I fought Brownie and he had
Yeah.
no jersey on. I said, geez, I wish I thought of that. He said, I didn't think
Yeah.
of that. He said, I just didn't have my jersey on. I didn't put it on. I take it off between periods. I just ran out there. And
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. I knew they did that in the game in Philly. I wasn't even aware of that. That's how singularly focused I was when it came to my job. I wasn't even paying attention to any of that. And I'm in the room. I have my skates undone. I never took my skates off. I never took my jersey off between periods. I just loosened my skates. And all of a sudden, the usher comes running and says, "Oh, there's a fight and going on, and you gotta come." So, and
Yeah.
I come out there, and there's Big Ed Hospital and Samuelson and Chico, and Pepe's doing the
Yeah.
turtle, and then here
Yeah.
comes Brownie, and I know I'm gonna end up with him. It's gonna be me, not John Cordick, not this guy, not that. It's gonna be me, and that's what it was. But I gotta tell you, just a crazy. When you look back at that, what are your thoughts and your feelings when you look at you were part of that? What goes through your mind?
Well, it certainly changed hockey. Hockey Night in Canada came on, and the brawl was still on. They were supposed to start the game, and the one thing I did do, which was instinctive, was I locked Hexy in the room because I said if we lose him, and he loved to fight, he's yelling at me, swearing at me. Let me out there. I want to help my teammates. I says, not a chance. You break your hand, we're done. So, and then I was out by the boards, and Mr. Snyder come down and said, get out there and break that up. I said, Mr. Snyder, I got patent leather shoes on. There's no way I'm going out that ice. I said, if you want to go out, go ahead, but there's no way I'm going out in that ice. I said, it's escalated to a point that, and then, I don't remember, Dougie Crossman
Flip-flops
goes out
on,
with flip-flops
I
on.
remember.
Yeah, that
it was crazy.
Incredible.
And it's funny. I had Brownie there, right? And I'm fighting him, and then we go for a little bit, and then I'd rest, and then I remember one time I got him. I'm holding the suspenders, and I had my head inside him, and he said,
"Yeah,
have you had enough?" And I went, "No," and I threw another punch, and away we went again. And I'm telling you, I had to. Thing is, Brownie didn't play, right? I had to play that game. Mike Keenan, I was junk. I went in the first shift. My shoulder, my neck, my shoulders, my muscles were all strained in my neck because of we were fighting for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It was crazy. I was junk.
I can tell. I don't know if you would remember this story, and I can tell you now, and you might recall, but we were also having a physical game in Montreal, and I didn't do this hardly ever, but you came over, you're yapping at the bench. So I jumped up on the bench and I said, what do you want? And you looked up at me and said, what are you going to do about it? He says, I know exactly what I'm going to do about it. You said, what? And the guys are looking at me on my team, and what's this crazy guy going to do? You're going to try to fight Knuckles. I said, I'm going to trade for you because I love guys like you. And you start laughing. So it diffused the whole situation, but it was a funny moment.
I remember, and I hate, and me, I hated coaches who yelled at players. I hated it. I despise that. If there's one thing I despise.
I didn't do it hardly ever.
I know. I remember. Yeah.
So that was, and so the next game we went into Montreal. We're skating around, and I'm at the bench because I used to watch the warm up. You come over and says, "So when is the trade
Yeah.
happening? I want to come
Yeah,
and play
I
for
did.
you."
I always wanted to play for you. Yeah, well, especially
Yeah,
after I left Montreal, the way I left with, I had a difficult time with Jean Perron,
yeah.
who, he made an inference to me one time that I should fight more, and once
Oh
he
boy.
he did that to me, I lost respect. Thing is, he wasn't well respected by our team at the time,
Yeah,
and Bob Gainey said it best. You don't always have to like your boss, but you have to basically respect the title. And a lot of guys didn't. And I was one of them. I won't speak for
yeah,
anybody else, but I was one of them. And yeah, I stood up for, and stayed true to myself. I always said, Coach ever tells me to go and fight, I'm fucking grabbing him right by the tie and telling him to go himself and go do it himself.
yeah,
Because I never had to be told.
yeah,
One coach, Jacques Lemaire, told me, Chris, you fight too much. Slow down.
yeah.
You get room. Use your room. You can play hockey. The first guy ever said, that guy was incredible for me. What an impact he had on my life, that guy. Incredible. One of my favorites.
Nice.
You didn't yell at players, Mike, on the other teams, but you yelled at a lot of referees.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you-
yeah.
Did you have any you have a good story with any referees? I seen you yelling in Russia before, and I was just like, do they even understand what he's saying? But you got
Yeah, Kerry Fraser, when I left Philadelphia, he bought my house. So I was, and I used to use kind of too many men on the ice or pull the goalie. And sometimes it was just to uh, take the time to address an official if he made a bad call or whatever. So anyway, I'm berating Kerry Fraser, and he comes over, and I'm going at it with him, and then he says, you know that house you sold me, the roof leaks. So I started laughing. He started laughing. So that was a funny moment. And,
how about today's game, Mike? When you look at today's game, you're out of coaching, and you look at today's hockey. Do you miss like the physical part of the game, the fighting part of the game? Do you think today's game is missing something, needs a little more? I mean, no red line, wide open, crazy. I hear Bobby Orr, and I bring this up a lot. The red line, Bobby Orr says, I wouldn't mind seeing the red line back in. One, does the league really care for the health of the players? If they did, they put the red line in. And two, he said, I'd love to see teams have to pass their way out of trouble and come up the ice together. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree with him 100%. And I've also gone on record as saying that when you have the red line, you've got to be a thinker. And, I can post up now at the far blue line, tip it in beyond the hunt. The defenseman can shoot it down to the other far blue line, tip it. They say, well, that's really fast going in. That's not fast.
Yeah.
That's just, and they're using the rules to their advantage, and it's certainly part of the game now. But I get frustrated by watching. I watched a lot of the playoffs, but I don't watch too much in the regular season. I get too frustrated with some of the tactics or systems that are being used, or the players' demeanor. And then there are some dangerous situations. I mean, a guy like Sidney Crosby's had some real severe concussions because of that open ice. Guys are going 100 miles an hour, and if you look back for a second and you get dinged, it's lights out. So there's a safety factor involved as well. And I know it's a physical game, and I would like to see a little bit more respect. Don't be driving a guy into the boards head first from behind.
We saw it the other night, right, in the final game, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of crazy things in our day, and you just expound upon it with the brawl we had in Montreal as an example. But there was sort of an element. There was an element of respect amongst most of the players. and I'm not so sure that exists. And I've asked a lot of people about it, and some people are reckless, and then the others they say, well, let's ease up on the hitting because it's a long schedule or a long night ahead of us or
Yeah.
whatever. So mixed feelings. And again, I said, like, I was able to adapt to different generations. You know, coaching in 1984 in the NHL, and then coaching even in Russia and China, but in 2009, still in the same league, you have to make the adaptations to the. But you know, even my last, like Jerome McGinley was a hard player. You know, he was a fighter and a competitive player, and led by example. So we still had guys around that were old school, if you like. So it was, you know, even some existing players are still in the league that I coached. They're a little bit older now, but there's some players still have that little bit of the old school mentality and expect the same from their teammates.
How do you think today, if you were to coach today, you think you'd have to probably kind of change a little bit, right? I mean, today I feel like you can't yell at anybody.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of entitlement. A lot of these players make a hell of a lot of money, and good for them. But with that comes responsibility and accountability. And for the most important reason is for your teammates. I mean, my career relies on the contributions that are made by my teammates and how successful we can become. Yeah, you'd have to have a different attitude. Even the New York Rangers situation was different in the fact, like Greg Gilbert, it was another guy that went from team to team with me. He said, Mike, you were a lot quieter in New York. I said, Gibby, we had a hell of a great
leadership core,
leadership group. Yeah, so I didn't have to say much, you know. Even Mark and were great friends with Brian Leach. But I heard Mark scold Leach one time. So, and they drove the games together. So it was, you know, accountability was not an issue in that team. But I can't tell you there was one guy who didn't respect the role that they were given and did their job. That's why you win the championship.
It's funny, and I respect that. I respect the. I can take crap from a coach, believe me, and then I can't. I mean, there's certain situations depending on the person. If I respect him, and he certainly, I'm going with it. And Lemaire was one of those guys for me. Mike Milbury was one of those guys for me. I love Milbury. You know, people talk about his GM coaching thing. They say, "What do you think as a coach?" I love them in Boston as a coach. Go through a wall for him. Now, when you look at today and we talk about today's game, there's a couple throwback coaches. We look at Sutter and John Tortorella.
Yes.
If they're coaches that are close to what you were, those are the guys. And that's all I ever hear. Oh, my God, this guy won't play for him. That guy. Look what Sutter did this year with Calgary. Johnny Hockey. Everybody said, Johnny Hockey's not going to be able to do anything with him. Oh, my God. Look what they did. I mean, they had a hell of a season. Yeah, they didn't win the whole thing, but that's a hell of a season they had in a turnaround.
Well, I know Darryl well. He was my assistant coach. And then in Chicago, then he hired me as the GM in Calgary. And if there's anybody that's kind of aligned with my style, he might even be more of a prick than me. That is Darryl and Torts. When I was in New York, by the way, Milbury is a great guy too. I worked with him on NBC, and we had a lot of great conversations. Yeah, and with Torts, we did a coaches show. I was on the broadcast now for the New York Rangers, and he was coaching them. And his philosophy is like it's aligned completely with mine. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond now in Philly. And I went to see. It's funny. We had the induction of Holmgren and Tocchet into the Hall of Fame in Philly, and they invited me to come
Yeah.
because Homer was my assistant coach, and of course, Tock played for me for 4 years, and they were
I
playing
watched it
Calgary
on
that
TV.
night. So I went down to see. I went down to see Daryl, and I said, you know, we had a great conversation, but I looked at the Flyers. I said, "Oh my God, this is
No.
not the Philadelphia Flyers." So they had strayed away from their identity and their culture, and John now is taking on the responsibility of trying to bring
So
that
do you
back.
think, well, certainly the way today's players are and all that, like, one thing I do, if I was coaching, I'd take that fucking tablet and I always tell Tim, and I'd throw it right through the fucking balcony. The tablet's gone.
Yeah,
Don't look at this thing. Catch your breath.
Yeah.
Get ready for your next shift. Watch the game. Shut up. But it's
Yeah.
crazy. We saw Kreider do it in the playoffs to his buddy. Was
yeah, I was just
awesome.
going to
I love
reference
that.
Yeah,
And then I also
Yeah.
saw Kreider talk about him afterwards, Buchnevich. Not what's his name? Yeah, Zibanejad. Sorry, not Buchnevich.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
and he was in tears. Like he had that much respect for him. That moved me. Now, when you look at those players today, and you talked about the entitlement, which would, when you look around the league, if you certainly watch, but which players would you love to coach today if you could?
Well, first of all, just to comment on that, that's exactly right. Hockey's not a rote game; it's instinctive. It's your ability to read quickly. It's not like a football coach. You're going to run a certain pattern or certain play, and that's it. And then you have another break and come up with another attack or defense or whatever. Connor McDavid, I met. I was coaching in a celebrity hockey game in Barrie, Ontario, and I had Gilmore and Corson and Mike Gardner and a bunch of guys from the NHL, and we broke up two teams, and so this kid is on my team, and like he's a boy, and he goes out for the first shift, and I turned to Dougie. He says, Gilmore, I said, "Who the hell's that?" He said, "He's the best player in the country." I said, "He's only 18 or 17 at the time." I said, "Oh my God." So, and he was a really respectful guy. He thanked me, Mr. Keenan. Thank you for participating in this charity function after the game. It was so nice to meet you. And so, and I like Austin Matthews, the way he's playing. Of course, look at the kids in Colorado. Stamkos was a stand-up
Yeah, he
guy, an old school leader. There's great players still that you'd enjoy coaching and being involved with, because the best players are the easiest to coach. Trust me, they're so hungry for success and to do well that it doesn't take much to get them ready or prepared. And the other part of my coaching style was that I played the best players the most.
Yeah.
And that's all they want. They want you to open the door and say, "Get out there." So,
and when you do that too, you get them in your corner, right? And that's a big part of coaching. You got to have that core group in your, right?
Well, you could probably say that's why you got the cup in Russia, right? You do that line of Mosiakin, Jerepov, and Kovash. Like
Kovash, yes.
That was the best line in my personal experience that I've ever seen or been on a team with. I mean, that Mosiakin is maybe the best player I've played with. Like the way he would just take over, especially in the playoffs. Like, I don't know. What did you feel about them? Like,
yeah, they were exceptional players that Chris, we put them together as a line, and the two wingers were in their off wings, which is important in the European style ice surface. And the centerman was a hard nosed, competitive guy, but the Zaripov was very, very, very skillful and competitive, and so was Mozakin, but very skillful. And they dominated the league and dominated the games. And one of the major reasons, we had a great goaltender in Koschichkin, but we had superstars carry the team, and again, they got all the ice time they could take. So it's pretty easy when they play to that level every night, and then you open the door for them. They respond.
Now,
They love it.
Lemire took a lot of heat for bringing the trap in. Apparently, he got tagged with the trap thing
Yeah.
and Jersey and the whole thing. And listen, I played that system. I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, you had to be in a position. You had to work in continuity with your players on the ice in order to feed off of those, create and feed off of turnovers and get into that transition game. Now, I hear people all, especially the league, and without the red line, I think obviously one of the reasons they took it out because of the trap, but teams still trap. We see it all the time, just not in the offensive zone so much. It's more in the neutral zone. Do you think the league is so scared to throw a red line in because of that the trap is going to come back full bore?
I don't know what they're thinking, but again, I would support Bobby Orr's thinking for sure. Interesting though, I never coached or very little trap work, and it was based on the people I had to coach, and Lemaire almost beat us. Jacques was coaching Jersey when we won in Game 7, but I had players that didn't want anything to do with that, like Jeremy Roenick, a kid, Larmer, Goulet, as an example, or in New York or in Philly, we had a quick team, a hard-nosed team, and New York, no way that Mark wanted to play like that. And then when I got Gretzky in St. Louis, no way he's playing that.
Well, you look at it, certainly there's teams with less talent. When you're going up against that powerhouse wide open team, it's a really good way to defend and a good way to kind of at least stay in the game with a lot of teams, right?
That's exactly right. And that like there's different ways of playing. I can go back to the Rochester championship team we had for the Calder Cup, and Bowman did it after, but Bowman hired me. So I had studied and hung out in 1981. There were 6 coaches, and I was very fortunate. I was a very young guy, and I was coaching in Rochester, and the Hockey Canada asked me to be a participant. There's 6 of us to write a book, and my study was Czechoslovakia. It's now Czech Republic, Slovakia. So they played left wing lock. So I actually was at every practice. I rode on the bus. I stayed with the team. I stayed in the hotel, and I studied them. And then when I went to Rochester, we had a lot of people were brought up and injuries and Jimmy Weimer, for example, who played for me in Peterborough. Anyway, we ran out of defensemen. So I said, and I knew Jimmy played junior for me at left wing, but he also played defense as a youngster before he came to Peterborough. And then we had Val James, tough Val James. I said, you guys are now defensemen because we don't have enough defensemen. We didn't actually have 5 guys. So then I said, we're going to play left wing lock because you guys have so little experience playing defense. And then we had guys that were on the left side that fit right into that mold. And it worked out well for us. But again, it was a different style. We won the championship by playing that way and having basically 2 attackers. And it was almost a rule that the left winger couldn't go over the offensive blue line unless we had possession of the puck. So it was adaptation, just as you said. The trap was brought in by Jacques Lemaire, fundamentally because when he played what he would believe to be better teams, he had an ability to shut them down, or his team did. as well as they could. So whether the league is fearful of that, they shouldn't be, because you still have to be a thinker to play the game well. And if you can get to that point, I don't know if the public would understand it, or if that's what they're afraid of, or sales will go down, or the fan base will drop. I don't know, but there's a lot of super skilled players out there that could make the adaptation as well.
How about goalies? Now, you had a little bit of a reputation of switching goaltenders. We heard about, the Eddie Belfort issue there, you and him in Chicago. Was that overblown or what? And what was it? How difficult was it for you at times when you had to pull a goalie? Or was it, fuck, I'm just doing the best thing for the team. This guy got to get out of here now. What was your philosophy when it came to that? Goaltenders.
First of all, I can tell you I coached 7 Vezina Trophy winners or Stanley Cup winners in goal. They're all different. And the genesis of it, first of all, Pelle Lindbergh was my goalie in Philly. God bless Pelle, killed. He played against my Rochester team, and he was a superstar. We beat him 4 straight, but if it hadn't been for them, we would have blown him out. If it hadn't been for Lindbergh. So anyway, I was going to Philly. I met with all the players in the summer. I took him to lunch in about middle of July, early August, and I said, Pelle, and he was struggling there. He was up and down, the minors, the majors. He was inconsistent. I said, Pelle, no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, you're my number 1 goalie. And he says, how can that be? I said, well, I saw how well you can play. And when I was coaching Rochester, you're an unbelievable goaltender. So he won the Vezina Trophy. And what I did, and at the time, when I was coming in the league, there was sort of an attitude of the coaches that they can't play all that much, or they can't play as many games. So I said, why would I have a better guy sitting on the bench when I can play him? And you have to manage his rest and work. And that's what I did. So the incidents with Eddie, so Eddie was coming up, and the crazy thing is that Dominic Hasek was the backup. Not quite yet. Dominic hadn't been there. But anyway, in that instance, so before the season started, I said, Eddie, would you like to play 80% of the games or 50%? He said, of course I want to play 80. I said, well, there's going to be some nights where the team's not spot on and I have to shake them up. There might be a night that you're not spot on, or there might be a night where I want to terrorize an official and I need time. So there's going to be different reasons. So he came over. He was all exasperated that I pulled him. I walked down. I grabbed him by the cuff of the sweater and say, Eddie, do you remember our deal? 80%? He said, yeah. I said, okay, be quiet. He did. Right. So, I had like Grant Fuhr. I think I played Grant almost all but 5 games, and nobody wanted him. So the story goes on this, and I'm sitting with Bob Berry.
Yeah, Bob coached me one of my first coaches, Claude Ruel, and then him. Yep.
Yeah. So Bobby and I are sitting in New York City. We had to go to the league office or something. So we're out in an outdoor cafe in the middle of the summer, and this car goes by and slams the brakes on, squealing in the streets. Out jumps Wayne Gretzky. Wayne says, how long are you guys sitting there? I said, how long do you want us to sit here? He said, I'll be back in an hour. I said, sounds good. We'll have a couple more beers. So he comes back. Janet jumps out with him. And they come over, and we're out in the outdoor cafe. And I said to Wayne, Wayne, I need a goalie. You got any ideas? And Janet jumped right up and says, well, Grant Fuhr. I said, Grant it is. So I went and got him, signed him, and he played there for a number of years. And nobody wanted him. And the same as the crazy things that happened, we were in expansion, and I had to separate Eddie and Dominic. So I picked Eddie, and I traded Dominic to Buffalo, John Muckler. John, he was a very unorthodox, and so what happened was John put him on waivers. He didn't want him, so I claimed him, and the league wouldn't let me take him because I was the one that traded him. Crazy rule. So then he goes and wins a Hart Trophy. So all different personalities, all different quirks. Hextall, crazy. Kiprusoff in they was called the Rubber Man because he was so flexible. Mike Richter, of course, won a championship. So
what do you think today when they look at the way, God, I don't know. Yeah, certainly a heavy schedule, and it's like maybe we'll get the starting goalie 50 games. You think it's almost like I wonder sometimes when we hear the game is faster today, and it is. I get all that. But I know one thing. When I played in the league, it was fast. I was on the ice. It was freaking fast.
Yep.
Now, I know it's faster. I get it. A little more wide open. But when you look at that era, I often think I don't know what kids would do today when, they during the pandemic, they showed all them old time games, the old games, like the slashing. Yep. The elbowing, everything. Like, I don't know. I think some of these guys today would freaking shrink and wilt if you had to go out there and play in a game like that.
I didn't watch the 94 championship game 7 for about 20 years after. And I looked at it and I said, that was vicious. That was vicious. I mean, Anderson got his nose broken, and Mess took no prisoners, no survivors, none of them. I mean, it was. And then I watch it now. Like even like I said, Stamkos old school. He smoked a couple of those players without any reservations at all. I mean, good checks. But hard, running right through them, not at them. So, it's an interesting game today. It's got some things that people say it's a lot fast. I mean, there's still look at Ovechkin, how powerful he is. I mean, Crosby still could motor, so it's full of superstars. And
you've been generous with your time, obviously. I mean, so much appreciate having you on.
I've enjoyed it,
Tim.
Hearing your
my
story.
voice.
It's an honor to have you on, and it was an honor for me to play for you too, Mike. Honestly,
thank you.
Can I ask a question?
This is our producer Barry.
Oh, if Barry was on your team, he'd
be in net every night.
This guy.
He'd be in net every night.
Mike, hey, thanks a lot for coming on. Really, it's
problem.
Been great. So
it's fun.
I have two questions I always ask, and they know it's coming. But I'll ask the first one's an easier one though. I mean, for a person like you as a coach, if you could pick your 5 guys, you could pick from anybody from the old days. We'll start from the old days because I don't want to say from the guys currently playing. Who would you pick as your first line?
That's a tough question for me. I think I coached more Hall of Famers than any other coach. And, including the guy that's 2,000 points ahead of the rest of the guys. So my name's Gretzky. So, and then, I got one of the strongest leaders. I mean, you're talking about forwards now, not even defense. I had the Hall of Fame defense, Norris Trophy, Hart Trophy winners.
So you got to pick 2D in a line. Pick 2D in a line.
Yeah. You get two goalies, too. The way you pull goalies, you get 2 goalies.
No, I don't want to exclude so many.
They won't take
players,
it personally.
So I know, but
right.
It's difficult for me to nail that down for you. I mean, I had Mario Lemieux in the Canada Cup '87, like how he played there, and on defense I had just for fun, Bork, Coffey, Murphy. I mean, Chelly,
Wow.
Pronger, Mark Howe. I mean, all Hall of
Brian
Famers.
Leach.
I
Leach
go
is
on and
another one,
on.
right?
Ronak, Goulet, Larmer, in the, Larms is in the Hall of Fame.
All
He
right,
should
so
be.
here's the deal.
But
All right, how
All
about
right.
this one?
okay.
Who was your mentor? Who was the coach you most looked up to, that they had the most influence?
Well, I had three guys that really influenced shaped my career to a certain extent. First of all, Tom Watt, who was the coach at the University of Toronto, a great communicator. He'd be just a hero in the United States. He won 9 national championships as a coach, and I studied under him the systems of the game and a lot of the technical part of the game. Then I had Bowman, who hired me. He would, and you guys would enjoy hearing this. After every game, he would come down. He'd drive down from Buffalo. He'd get in his car before the game ended and start driving home. I'd do the little press conference, and then I had to answer. Like, he would call me at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and say, "Why you have Mongrain out there for the face-off?" So he was very detailed in terms of bench management, and I was as well. That's probably my best strength, is reading the players during the game on the bench and preparing them with great practices. And then another guy that I work with and coach for me, that was an innovator in terms of, again, additional information, was Roger Nielsen.
I played for Roger in New York. I loved him.
So, those are three guys that I came in contact at an early age that influenced or helped me shape my own coaching style and skills.
All right. I was going to ask, if you could go back looking, what's the biggest mistake you made as a coach? You wish maybe now, if you could do it, you had a do-over, you'd go back and change it. What would it be?
That's easy for me to answer because it's always bothered me. We lost in game 1 in Pittsburgh for the Stanley Cup when I was coaching Chicago. And it was really unfair. Annie Van Helleman called some bogus calls that helped Yager and Mario Lemieux. And after the game, I give the team shit. And that was the worst thing I should have ever done, because they got Andy was not balanced that game. I would put it that way. And so we lost not because of how we had a lead. It wasn't because how we played, is what had happened on the ice by the official. And I did that, and I regretted it for the rest of my career. Like, these kids we're in the finals, and we've been in the Final Four 3 or 4 years. We won the President's Trophy, and we had great leadership, great players, and Brett Chelly, Steve Smith, Kraft.
What made you do it? Did you feel like, did you feel personally like they let you down, or what?
No, they didn't let me down, but it was the wrong response in my behalf. I should have reinforced and say, guys, super game. Let's get a little bit better and we can beat this team. But they had me enough. It's sort of like water off a duck's back. But I always said to myself, I wish I hadn't done that.
All right, Barry, you have one more and that's it.
Last one, I promise. Okay. It's your hockey eulogy. What's the first line in your hockey eulogy?
He cared.
There you go. Mike Keenan.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome to have you today.